Imagine arriving at Indianapolis Raceway Park for the 1963 U.S. Nationals, the most important drag race in the country. In the supercharged gas class sits a powder blue 1933 Willys Coupe. It looks less like a cutting-edge race car and more like something forgotten behind an old Midwestern barn. The man driving it is George Montgomery, a reserve machinist and toolmaker from Dayton, Ohio. He is not part of the powerful Southern California racing establishment. He has no major factory sponsor, no large professional crew, and no army of mechanics waiting in the pits. Yet he has just defeated Stone, Woods, and Cook, the most celebrated gasser team in America, in a contest described as the race of the event. It is his third victory at drag racing's biggest national meeting. Before Montgomery, nobody had managed to win there more than once. Track announcers began calling him Ohio George. At first, the nickname was simply an easy way to identify the outsider from Dayton. Eventually, however, his name became impossible to ignore. Long before the rest of the sport caught up, Montgomery was experimenting with ideas that would later become standard. He brought drag cars into a wind tunnel when almost no private racer considered aerodynamics. He created one of the earliest genuinely successful turbocharged combinations in top-level drag racing. The car became so difficult to beat that officials eventually removed turbocharged engines from the class altogether. He also found a way to place the appearance of a current model Mustang over a chassis rooted in the old Willys design, pushing the regulations to their absolute limit while remaining technically legal. One of the officials responsible for approving the car understood exactly what Montgomery had done and quietly allowed it. The battered 1933 Willys that he purchased from an Ohio salvage yard for only $100 would ultimately become a museum piece. Today, it belongs to the Henry Ford Museum, displayed in the company of machines such as Ford's Le Mans-winning GT40. That is the level of historical importance the little blue coupe eventually achieved. This is the story of George Montgomery, a self-taught engineer working from a plain concrete block speed shop in Dayton, entering the category controlled by California teams and repeatedly beating them with careful preparation, original thinking, and extraordinary driving ability. To understand why his rise was so unusual, it helps to understand American drag racing in the late 1950s. At that time, Southern California was the center of the sport. The dry lakes at El Mirage and Yurok had served as proving grounds for an entire generation of hot rodders. As organized drag racing expanded during the early 1950s, much of its culture, technology, and business infrastructure spread outward from Los Angeles. The major camshaft grinders, engine builders, and speed equipment manufacturers were concentrated there. Famous strips such as Lyons, Pomona, and later Orange County International Raceway were located in the region. California's climate also allowed teams to race, test, break parts, rebuild, and improve their cars throughout the year. The gas coupe and sedan divisions, usually shortened to gassers, captured the character of that world. The regulations required recognizable American production coupes or sedans. Exotic racing fuels were prohibited. The cars had to run on gasoline. Classes were determined through a formula comparing vehicle weight with engine displacement. A light car carrying a large engine could enter the fastest gas categories. Add a supercharger, and the car moved into the supercharged gas divisions, with the top combinations sitting at the summit of full-body drag racing. What separated gassers from purpose-built dragsters was their connection to street cars. During the early years, competitors still had to retain equipment such as headlights, taillights, windshield wipers, a horn, a generator, an emergency brake, and a valid license plate. In theory, these were machines a person could drive on public roads and then race at the strip. The chassis rules reinforced that identity. A fabricated tube frame was not allowed. Beneath the body had to be a genuine production automobile frame. Their requirement kept the category visually and mechanically connected to ordinary hot rods in a way that long, specialized top-fuel dragsters never were. By the middle of the 1950s, California racers had identified an especially effective platform. The Willys Coupe, particularly the 1933 and 1940-41 bodies. The cars were short, light, narrow, and offered favorable dimensions under the weight-to-displacement regulations. A Willys could carry a large engine while remaining within the quickest class. West Coast teams took full advantage. Stone, Woods, and Cook became famous with their blue 1941 Willys. Big John Mazmanian raced a brilliant candy apple red version. Cass Pittman, Junior Thompson, and other leading competitors built their own formidable examples. These operations had funding, contacts, experienced crews, and immediate access to the California speed industry. George Montgomery grew up roughly 2,400 miles away. He was born in Dayton on January 27, 1933, the same year his most famous Willys had been manufactured. Raised in a working-class neighborhood during the Depression and the Second World War, he developed an obsession with cars at an early age. As a teenager in the late 1940s, he and his friends cruised through downtown Dayton, circling the Civil War Monument before accelerating along Main Street. A local radio station operated from the upper floor of a nearby building, and its announcers sometimes watched the action below and described the street races over the air. Montgomery later compared the atmosphere to American graffiti, except that he had actually lived it. His first important project was a 1934 Ford 5-window coupe purchased for about $25. He removed the fenders and built a modified flathead V8 for it. In 1951, at only 18 years old, he and a friend hauled the Ford to Bonneville, where it reached approximately 125 miles per hour on assault. The car continued to evolve. By the middle of the decade, it carried a supercharged Cadillac engine of roughly 414 cubic inches. Montgomery entered the NHRA Drag Safari and defeated a field that included dedicated dragsters, winning outright with a full-body coupe. Hot Rod magazine later featured the Ford in its April 1957 issue. All of this took place while he maintained a regular industrial career. Montgomery worked as a machinist and toolmaker at Delco Products, a General Motors facility in Dayton. At Patterson Cooperative High School, he had studied advanced mathematics, mechanical drawing, and blueprint interpretation. He completed a toolmaker apprenticeship and remained at Delco for 16 years. His most important education, however, was taking place after work. In January 1950, he opened Georgia's Speed Shop at 716 Brantley Avenue. The modest concrete block building became his laboratory. Over time, it would be recognized as one of the oldest continuously operating speed shops in the United States. An unusual chapter from this period helped finance his racing. The University of Dayton and Wright-Patterson Air Force Base selected Montgomery for a classified government project in Nevada involving the effects of atomic explosions on parked aircraft. The assignment required an FBI security clearance. When investigators visited people who knew him, one worried neighbor contacted his mother, assuming George had somehow landed in serious trouble. In reality, he had been chosen for government work. Montgomery saved his wages and travel allowance from the project and directed the money into race car development. His defining car appeared in late 1958. A friend told him about an old coupe sitting in a salvage yard near Hillsboro, Ohio. The junkyard owner's grandchildren had reportedly been playing inside it. Montgomery paid $100 and brought it home. It was a 1933 Willys coupe, not the smoother and more fashionable 1940 or the 1941 body favored by many California racers. The earlier model was tall, square, and visibly antiquated. To most people, it looked clumsy. Montgomery saw its advantages. The car was unusually light for a production coupe, with a factory weight of roughly 2,245 pounds before racing modifications. Its wheelbase was about a foot shorter than that of many Ford-based competitors. During acceleration, this helped transfer weight toward the rear tires. The compact body also presented a relatively small frontal area, despite its upright shape. Without relying on the West Coast teams or copying their exact methods, Montgomery independently reached the same conclusion. A Willys offered the right foundation. He installed a supercharged Cadillac V8 enlarged to approximately 432 cubic inches. Much of the induction system had to be invented or adapted in his own shop. He modified a Craigar 4 to 71 manifold to accept a GMC 6 to 71 supercharger and machined the drive pulleys himself. Fuel was supplied through a Hilborn 2-port injection. The early transmission was a Cadillac LaSalle 3-speed. Later, Montgomery switched to a GM Hydromatic prepared by Hydromotive in Chicago. For the body, he chose Cadillac's 1953 Pastoral Blue, the same color he had previously used on his 1934 Ford. The powder blue paint would become one of the most recognizable visual signatures in gasser history. Speed was not the initial problem. Traction was. Montgomery discovered that placing heavy ballast in the trunk helped the rear tires bite into the track. This solution was characteristically practical. He filled a spare wheel with concrete, creating roughly 200 pounds of movable weight, and mounted it at the rear of the car. Officials eventually prohibited the method, but before that happened, it helped transform the Willys into a consistent winner. At the 1959 U.S. Nationals, then held at Detroit Dragway, the Blue Coupe ran 11.94 seconds at 124.65 miles per hour. Montgomery won A/gas and continued through the eliminations to claim the Little Eliminator title. A Dayton toolmaker had entered the largest drag race in America with a $100 junkyard coupe and won on his first attempt. He returned in 1960 and repeated the achievement. The Willys ran 11.59 seconds at just over 129 miles per hour, and Montgomery again captured Little Eliminator. His prize included a new 1960 Ford Falcon Ranchero, which he kept and brought to racing events for decades. By 1961, the Willys was running in the 10.9-second range at more than 130 miles per hour and winning its class at Indianapolis Raceway Park. The established California teams could no longer treat Montgomery as a regional curiosity. Stone, Woods, and Cook had long represented the standard of the category. Their team was remarkable for reasons beyond performance. Fred Stone and Leonard Woods, both black team owners, employed white driver Doug Cook during an era of deep racial segregation. At some tracks, which could compete for trophies but still struggled to obtain a motel room nearby. Leonard Woods Jr. later explained that his father and Stone faced far more hostility from the white racing establishment than most observers understood. Their ability to build one of the sport's dominant teams under those conditions remains a major story in its own right. They had been a combination everyone wanted to defeat. Then Montgomery began beating them at the Nationals. Another major figure was Big John Mazmanian, the 6'5" Armenian-American from East Los Angeles and a veteran of the U.S. Navy. His candy apple red 1941 Willys was as polished as a show car, with immaculate detailing and an engine compartment prepared to exhibition standards. The repeated battles among Mazmanian, Stone, Woods, and Cook and other California stars became known as the Gasser Wars. The racing press followed those rivalries almost like serialized entertainment. Montgomery remained separate from much of that spectacle. He would arrive at a national event, defeat the leading cars, and return to Dayton. At many races, he traveled without a permanent crew and recruited people at the track to assist him. He did not carry a transporter filled with spare engines and components. He did not rebuild the motor after every pass simply because larger teams did. Instead, he relied on exact preparation and a decade of experience behind the wheel. Leonard Woods Jr. later summarized Montgomery's ability in direct terms. George was a genius with racing cars. The 1963 season marked a major transition. Changes to the weight per cubic inch rules encouraged Montgomery to replace the Cadillac with a Chevrolet 327, enlarged to somewhere near 375 cubic inches. He retained the GMC 6 to 71 supercharger, but used a lightweight magnesium housing developed with chassis innovator Pete Robinson. Fiberglass fenders, doors, hood, and grille reduced the Willys mass. At the U.S. Nationals, the car recorded a 10.45-second pass at 129 miles per hour, won the supercharged gas class, and advanced to the Middle Eliminator Championship. The defining round placed Montgomery against Doug Cook in a Stone, Woods, and Cook Willys. Contemporary observers called it the race of the meat. Montgomery won, It was his third triumph at the Nationals, an unprecedented record at the time. A year later, Ford contacted him with an offer that would completely alter the car. The company wanted its most advanced racing engine installed in one of the most successful gassers in the country. That engine was Ford's 427 cubic inch single overhead cam V8, commonly known as the Camry. Developed for competition, it was capable of extraordinary output. With a GMC 6-71 supercharger and gasoline fuel, the combination was said to produce power in the neighborhood of 1,200 horsepower. Such output demanded exceptional precision. The Willys had been a 10-second car with a Chevrolet engine. With the Ford Camry, it would eventually reach the 8-second range. This was not a small improvement, but a leap into an entirely different level of performance. Ford support also took Montgomery overseas. In 1964, he joined the U.S. Drag Festival in Britain, an exhibition featuring prominent American racers, including Don Garlits, Tommy Evo, Tony Nancy, Ronnie Sox, Dave Strickler, and Bill Jenkins. The group crossed the Atlantic by ship while the race cars traveled below deck. Montgomery shared a cabin with K.S. Pittman. British spectators had little preparation for the sound, violence, and speed of American drag racing. The exhibition left an enormous impression. Back in the United States, the Camry-powered Willys continued rewriting records. At the 1966 U.S. Nationals, it ran 9.58 seconds at 153.58 miles per hour. Astonishing figures for a gasoline-burning production-bodied car, still using a factory-style frame. At the 1967 Winter Nationals in Pomona, Montgomery entered California territory and defeated the local teams on their home ground. Eventually, the Willys reached the 8-second zone and exceeded 160 miles per hour. At those speeds, Montgomery began examining a problem that most drag racers had barely considered: aerodynamic stability. He arranged for the Willys to be evaluated in a Ford wind tunnel. Private drag racers almost never used wind tunnels during the 1960s. Even many major racing programs had limited access to them. The results confirmed that the famous Blue Coupe was aerodynamically poor. Its tall stance and broad, nearly vertical surfaces produced substantial drag and lift. Montgomery later admitted that the car had not handled particularly well. Because it was the only serious drag car he had driven, he had accepted its behavior as normal. Even after learning the truth, he continued racing it. The Willys had built his reputation, and the regulations offered few clearly superior alternatives. Then Ford Racing executive Charlie Gray proposed placing Montgomery in a car that resembled a Kurt Scheuer model. Ford wanted the public to see him racing a Mustang. The rule book created an immediate obstacle. Gas-class cars required a separate production frame. The Mustang used unit body construction and had no conventional frame beneath it. A normal Mustang could not legally become a regulation gasser. Montgomery's answer was both ingenious and provocative. He obtained frame rails from another 1933 Willys, stretched them by 10 inches to match the intended dimensions, and created a new chassis around them. Over that structure, he installed a completely custom fiberglass body shape to resemble a 1967 Mustang 2+2 Fastback. The body looked like a production Mustang, but it was not taken from one. Underneath, the car could still claim ancestry from an approved production frame. Montgomery had obeyed the written regulations while almost completely escaping their original intention. He presented the project to NHRA Technical Director Bill Farmer Dismuke and explained the construction in detail. Dismuke approved the car and kept the arrangement quiet. Known as the Malco Gasser, the Mustang debuted at the 1967 NHRA Spring Nationals in Bristol and immediately ran in the 9-second range. Its best performance eventually reached 8.12 seconds at 173.07 miles per hour on gasoline. The car used a wheelbase of only 92 inches and established 5 NHRA national records. Montgomery later explained that he had not cheated. He had simply studied every rule and pushed each one as far as possible. He considered the Malco Mustang the best engineered car of its era, and its results supported the claim. The next stage was even more radical. For 1969, Montgomery built another Mustang, this time based visually on the new sports roof body and backed by the Mr. Gasket Company. Instead of using the proven supercharged Camry, he developed an engine combination almost unheard of in serious drag competition. The engine was a Boss 429 enlarged to roughly 450 cubic inches and fed by two Schwitzer turbochargers. A twin-turbocharged gasoline drag car at that level was an extraordinary concept in 1969. The engine drew attention, but the chassis was equally advanced. Montgomery designed a system that allowed the loading at each corner of the car to be adjusted independently. By changing the setup, he could precisely control weight distribution across all four wheels. The approach resembled techniques that major oval track teams would later use. Yet it was virtually unknown in drag racing at the time. Montgomery was building tuning capability into the chassis years before the rest of the sport understood its value. The earlier Malco Mustang had already won the AA/gas supercharged title at the 1968 Nationals with an 8.56-second run at 171 miles per hour and earned the event's Best Engineered award. In 1969, Montgomery captured his fourth Indianapolis title, winning Super Eliminator under remarkable circumstances. During the semifinal, an idler pulley in the blower drive failed. His car was barely moving toward the finish line when opponent Paul Stage left too early and received a red light. Montgomery did not realize he had one until his son Greg ran from the far end of the strip to tell him. The team then rushed to locate replacement parts and repair the damaged car before the final. Montgomery made the call and won the championship against an AA/altered roadster. He had advanced with a broken race car in a round he nearly failed to complete, repaired it under pressure, and then won the national title. The turbocharged Mustang remained competitive into the 1970s. It earned consecutive competition eliminator victories at the 1973 and 1974 Gator Nationals. Officials repeatedly adjusted the performance index to reduce its advantage, at one stage applying a half-second penalty. Finally, in 1975, turbocharged engines were banned for the class. That rule change illustrates how far Montgomery had moved beyond his competitors. When officials must outlaw a technology to restore competitive balance, the machine using it is no longer merely clever. It has exposed the limitations of the existing category. Many modern pro-modified racers consider Montgomery's twin-turbo Mustang an important ancestor of today's high-powered door cars. George ended full-time competition after the September 1985 U.S. Nationals. He was 52 years old and had spent approximately 35 years racing. Retirement from regular driving did not end his engineering career. In 1986, General Motors approached George's speed shop with a major technical assignment. The shop was asked to build and maintain the Buick V6 engines used by the Indy Lights series, the developmental open-wheel championship that prepared drivers for IndyCar. George and his son Greg produced more than 100 engines and operated the program for 16 years. Every engine was expected to survive either 3 races or 1,000 miles. Buick made its priorities clear. These cars appeared on television, and engine failures were unacceptable. The responsibility initially concerned Montgomery, but the program proved highly reliable. By the time it concluded in 2001, the engines had completed 16 seasons with very few failures. He also prepared engines for Evel Knievel's stunt vehicles. Their association began around Knievel's famous 1975 jump over 14 Greyhound buses at Kings Island, broadcast nationally on ABC's Wide World of Sports. Knievel reportedly tried to recruit Montgomery as a full-time employee. George declined, although he continued assisting at major events and traveled with the operation to Australia and other locations. Meanwhile, the Bradley Avenue Speed Shop remained active. Greg Montgomery learned machining and engine building directly from his father. As a small child, he reportedly stood on a box so he could reach the drill press. By the 1990s, Greg had assumed responsibility for the shop's daily operation. The race cars also survived, which is unusual in a sport where outdated machines were often dismantled modified beyond recognition, or abandoned. In 2005, the Henry Ford Museum acquired the original 1933 Willys, the same $100 salvage yard car that launched Montgomery's national reputation. The museum displayed it near Ford's Le Mans-winning GT40. The contrast is striking. One vehicle emerged from a factory-backed international program, funded with millions of dollars. The other began as a discarded coupe rebuilt by a Dayton toolmaker inside a simple concrete block garage. They belong together because both demonstrate the same principle. Engineering is the process of confronting a problem and producing an answer others fail to see. Montgomery's first major hot rod, the 1934 Ford, is preserved at the Don Garlits Museum of Drag Racing in Ocala, Florida. The 1967 Malco Gasser Mustang belongs to the Peterson Automotive Museum in Los Angeles. The 1969 Mr. Gasket Mustang remains in a private collection. A later 1972 twin-turbo funny car was discovered at a swap meet in Springfield, Ohio, by collector Nick White. It underwent a detailed restoration based on surviving evidence. When Montgomery saw the completed car, his response was simple: "Good job, Nick." None of the major machines from his career disappeared. They were not scrapped, stripped for components, or left outdoors to decay. Every historically important car from more than 3 decades of competition has been preserved somewhere. For an independent racer working with a relatively modest budget in Dayton, that is a rare legacy. Recognition arrived gradually. Montgomery entered the International Drag Racing Hall of Fame in 1992 and received a Lifetime Achievement Honor in 1998. When the NHRA published its list of the 50 greatest drag racers in 2000, he ranked 28th among champions and legends from every major category. In 2020, he was inducted into the Motorsports Hall of Fame of America. Don Garlits and Linda Vaughn, two of the most recognizable figures in drag racing history, presented the honor. Before the ceremony, someone asked Montgomery to name the greatest moment of his racing life. Rather than choosing one of his national victories or record-setting runs, he answered that his greatest moment would be the one arriving in March, his induction. For a working-class boy from Dayton, reaching the Hall of Fame represented the culmination of everything that had come before. George Montgomery died on August 24, 2023, at the age of 90. Tributes remembered him as an early Gasser star, a multiple Indianapolis winner, and an innovator whose influence extended far beyond his own era. Looking across his career, a clear pattern emerges. The concrete-filled spare wheel was eventually prohibited, but it solved an immediate traction problem. His wind tunnel testing anticipated common drag racing practice by roughly 2 decades. The independently adjustable chassis appeared years before similar ideas spread through the sport. His turbocharged engine program was so advanced that officials answered it with a ban, only for turbocharging to return later as a foundation of modern high-performance door car racing. None of those breakthroughs began in California, and factory support did not create them. They began inside a concrete block shop on Bradley Avenue in Dayton, where a professional toolmaker applied industrial standards of measurement, accuracy, and repeatability to race cars. Montgomery once explained that he kept his car legal for its class even when competitors ignored the rules during match races. In his view, building and racing the car correctly was the only way to become genuinely good. Eventually, he became so difficult to defeat that some rivals stopped appearing against him at national events. The frustration of those opponents could be summarized in one blunt question. If they could not beat Ohio George while bending the rules, how were they supposed to beat him when he followed them? That was George Montgomery. He rarely needed to boast. The machinery spoke for him, and it said more than words ever could.